residents, do you think, in this instance, given enough warning about the flooding risks?
Good afternoon, Ashley. I think the severe weather, particularly heavy rainfall events like the one that we've experienced in New South Wales over the last several days, can often be fairly hard to predict and nail down. And that's really why we've seen sort of this dynamic weather event playing out, where we've seen rainfall move around the state, which is really impacting upon the rises of the rivers. In terms of the warnings that were originally provided, certainly there was advice there provided by authorities about the extent to which heavy rainfall, based upon their original understanding, might impact. Certainly that's evolved over time, but I point again to that difficulty in really nailing down such extreme rainfall, given the current limitations of weather modelling and science.
For those of our viewers who aren't familiar with the geography of the Hawkesbury Nepean regions, what is it about that area that does make it such a severe flood risk there? We're just seeing so much water. The pictures we've been showing our viewers today have been extraordinary.
Look, the Hawkesbury Nepean Valley is one of Australia's greatest flood risks. Flooding there can be very dangerous, particularly in large, severe floods. There's about 90,000 people that live on the floodplain in Western Sydney there on the Hawkesbury Nepean, and they are, a really significant risk of flooding. The reason why floodwaters can be so dangerous out in that valley is at the lower reaches of the river and the floodplain, there's the Slackfield Gorge, and essentially that gorge acts a bit like a bathtub, and it won't allow water to escape quick enough, and as a consequence, that water starts to back up, and we start to see some really extreme flood depths. So you might be in a large flood in the Hawkesbury Nepean Valley, and what you might see in other flood environments of people just getting flooded above their floorboards, you can really experience some very severe depths, flooding above people's rooftops, etc., in those communities along that river valley. And certainly we think that that river valley in particular is a really dangerous place in terms of flooding.
Andrew, in the news business, we talk about one-in-a-century events. We like to look back over time to really highlight just how unusual these sorts of events are. But that term, a once-in-a-century event, is one that I feel like as a reporter over the past 15 years or so, I've used several times, looking at several instances, whether we're looking at bushfires or flooding in this country. Is this sort of thing happening more often?
Look, I think the first thing to say is that this event and the flooding is certainly not unprecedented, and an event that would be anticipated, expected, and should be well planned for. We've certainly seen some severe flooding, but flooding which has not necessarily broken records of previous flood events in the past. Notably in the Hawkesbury Nepean Valley that we were talking about before, the flooded records back in 1867, and that was a particular severe flood. In terms of the influence of climate change, we know that in a warmer atmosphere, the atmosphere can hold more water, so we'd expect to see a higher frequency of extreme rainfall events in the future, which is particularly concerning for urban catchments with impervious surfaces and flash flooding.
Are you surprised when we see these sorts of events that every time we do see some people taking what appears to be really risky flood-related behaviour?
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm not surprised. People driving through floodwater, people entering floodwater, really seems to be quite an entrenched behaviour in Australian society. Floods kill more people than bushfires in Australia historically. And the number one reason and way that people end up with tragic outcomes during flooding is entering floodwater. And it often only means a very small error of judgment, be it a misjudgment of how deep the water is, or the capacity of their vehicle to be able to enter water, or simply their own capabilities to be able to either swim through floodwater or to drive through floodwater. So, just a simple misjudgment, a very small error of judgment can result in very tragic outcomes. So certainly when authorities like the New South Wales SES and other SESs around the country urge people not to enter floodwater, people should abide by that advice. And that old adage of if it's flooded, forget it, certainly holds true.
Very good tip. Andrew Gissing, appreciate you joining us with your expertise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ashley.